What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another video. And Pro Tour Lord of the Rings wrapped up about Sunday morning-ish, and today, the day after, kind of had some time to think about it and kind of give some in-depth thoughts of the Pro Tour itself, how things panned out, and some of the other things that we talked about in our video going over like kind of what we expected to see from the Pro Tour. And I'm going to be going over some things I got right, some things I got wrong, and everything in between. So, of course, if this kind of stuff interests you, I post other modern content and Pioneer content as well, which we're probably going to see a lot of Pioneer stuff coming up since it's kind of the RCQ season for it. While we still have it, if you are interested in any of that stuff like that, please consider subscribing to the channel, ring the notification bell, so you know when videos like that get posted. And if you go into the description of this video, there's two links. One goes to my Twitch channel, the other one goes to the Discord server. Feel free to follow both of those and join and follow on Twitch so you know when I go live. So Pro Tour Lord of the Rings, we knew was kind of going to be headlined by two things. There was probably going to be a lot of the One Ring, and in turn, a lot of the other cards from the set. And we kind of got that right. Like they were definitely on full display with 4 out of the 8 decks in the top 8 all playing 4 copies of the One Ring, and really the Evoke deck playing, I believe, 4 Bowmaster, which we'll pull up here in a second. Here, yep. So playing 4 Bowmaster. So um, while not a very good showing in the top 8 for Bowmasters, because the rest of the top 8 was rounded out by 3 Team Rhino decks. Then we had 3 Tron decks, and then Amulet Titan and Arachnos Evoke. Uh, One thing that you'll notice in not in this top 8 is that there was no 4-color Omnath, despite being the second most played deck in the format. So what happened? How did we get here? And honestly, like this top 8, like watching it and especially the finals was some of like the best Magic that I've watched in a long time. Like it was truly an amazing top 8, great coverage as always. And if you get the chance to like rewatch it, either watching it like on the official like Magic the Gathering Twitch channel or whenever they post the videos onto their YouTube channel, I highly recommend watching it because it is definitely some top level Magic on display with a lot of plays that I think some people just would not think of, or taking lines that just didn't seem like that they would be possible, and just kind of like helping expand like kind of your repertoire as like a player, and just like other things to like keep in mind like when you're playing and stuff. So going through this top 8 real quick, it was Rakdos versus Tron, with Rakdos obviously taking down the event in the hands of Jacob Beardsley, who was a first-time competitor at the Pro Tour and won the Pro Tour. And the last person I remember going to their first Pro Tour and even like making top 8 and then in turn also making the finals was Jackson Cunningham back in M15, where he unfortunately ended up losing to blue-white control in that top 8, but to a very good like even flock as well. So just kind of a neat little fact uh, from like the Pro Tour history, I guess. The last confirmed one that I know is Jackson Cunningham. So really cool. But from there, Jacob Beardsley had to beat Dominic Harvey in the semifinals, which Dominic Harvey is like an absolute beast with Amulet Titan. He has kind of written tons of articles about it. I mean, he has like probably one of the most in-depth deck guides probably of all time, just on Amulet Titan, and played the deck very well. Just Jacob Beardsley just was able to execute his game plan very well, and played great honestly throughout the entirety of the top 8 and through the tournament. I mean, obviously have to if you want to take down the Pro Tour and everything, but just great. Honestly, played like out of his mind. It was amazing, great stuff to watch. You have 3 Team Rhinos decks, kind of like rounding out this top 8. All of them losing in the quarterfinals, which is surprising, with Tron being the other one that lost. But that said, Tron putting 3 copies into the top 8, 2 of them advancing, and then no chance for a mirror in the finals because they had to play each other. In which Kristen Calcano, who took down Simon Nielsen earlier in the Swiss, ended up taking him down again in the semifinals. and a 5 game series, which was another like kind of really cool game to watch, even though like Tron is just kind of known for like throwing haymakers and stuff like that. So that was pretty sweet. The whole top eight was great. The whole tournament itself, like watching all the games and stuff, were great. Coverage awesome. All of that. I cannot sing high enough praises for this. This was like an amazing Sunday of Magic, and the only downside being that with the time difference, it started at 4 a.m. instead of like 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, normal time. Uh, I was kind of keeping an eye on like the viewer total and stuff for this, and it was usually somewhere between like I think like 12,000 to like 20,000 people at like any given moment, even during the limited part of it, which was really cool and just kind of I think a testament of how popular the modern format is and just how consistently it is, even when people like to kind of trash the format and say that it does broken things, kind of like what the Rakdos Evoke deck does, and even kind of like what Tron does. But I also think it's kind of like what makes the format a lot of fun, and the fact that there are other decks in the format. I mean, just if you look over to the right at the metagame summary, there's 3, 4, 5, 6 decks that had over 5%, and then 8 decks with 4% or more of a metagame share. And even though you have, 3 decks over 10% and Tron bordering on like 9%, like that's still a pretty diverse field, with a decent amount of decks, seeing at least double digit copies in, the whole meta and stuff like that, which, is really nice to see. And I think like a testament to how diverse the modern metagame actually is. And of course, like a bunch, like almost a fifth of the field thinking that Rakdos midrange is probably far and away the best deck in the format, having almost 20 more copies than 4 to 5 color Omnath, which I thought was going to be the most played deck in the format, and ended up being second. So like I was still wrong and in technical by like a wide margin, but nonetheless, was one of the top 2 decks played in the format. Another thing that we had talked about was like Tron and Burn would be some pretty good meta picks to have, just because they fight the One Ring, which we assumed was going to be the most popular card. Which, when we get to it in a second, it was by far the most popular card. Even though Rakdos Midrange isn't typically a deck that wants to play it, and it was almost 20% of the field, the One Ring was still the most popular card over cards like Bowmaster, over Chalice of the Void, Thoughtseize, Fury, uh, and Grief, things like that. Uh, so, with that being said, we had Mono Green Tron, who was undefeated in day one. Actually, had 2 copies undefeated, but both one of them had to play each other. Simon Nielsen and Zach Keeney, who Simon Nielsen ended up winning, and then it took that to going 12-0 before getting to kind of sweat it out and draw in a top 8. And there was a burn deck. I can't remember the name of the player who did it, but they were going over the undefeated decks on day one, and there was a burn deck that was 5-0. Now, of course, the overall result is kind of whatever, right? Simply for the fact that there is a Merfolk player that went 8-2. You'll see Daniel Kristoff went 8-2 with Merfolk, which I mean is really good. Obviously, it's up there with all the other people that played very good in the modern format. Jim Davis on Yawgmoth, a deck that I thought was going to be a little bit more represented and do better overall, but only like one 8-2 player on Yawgmoth, and then there's a 7-3 player on Yawgmoth, and then it kind of falls off from there. But Burn and Tron like ended up being pretty good picks. Ended up, I believe, at least in Tron's case, like overperforming. It might have been the fourth fourth highest played deck in the metagame, but it still put 3 copies in the top 8, got someone to the finals, and if you looked at like ninth place and I think even 10th place, I believe I know Alexander Hayne for a fact played Tron, and I think either 10th or 11th place was also a Tron player. So like 5, 6 players in the top 16 playing Tron, and then Crashing Footfalls, even though it was third, and I think has a little bit harder of a time, beating Tron, and you know probably doesn't necessarily care too much about Rakdos mid range, but also could kind of get wrecked by them, putting 3 copies in the top 8, and I believe like another 1 or 2 players in the top 16. So very impressive stuff from them. I definitely give them kind of like my overperformers, even though they were third and fourth in the metagame. They still put a bunch of players in the top 16 and put them in a great spot to make the top eight, and of course, like win the tournament. So I mean that like to me that's almost a definition of performing. We'll throw Merfolk in there as well, just for the fact that Merfolk's not necessarily a deck that you see, which might have contributed to the fact that it can be super aggressive, and also just isn't something that people are used to playing. Probably lines up pretty well with a lot of the other threats and stuff that people want to be playing. That said, still going 8-2 with the deck, awesome. Could definitely gets an honorable mention for an overperformer. Some underperformers might not be surprising. 4/5 color Omnath, and then the Yawgmoth deck. For me personally, I thought the Yawgmoth deck was going to be a better position, getting to play 4 Orcish Bowmaster, and even in some cases, some of them getting to like play the One Ring ended up like not being a recipe for success. It kind of follows like the Jund idea of thinking, where like even though Jund gets to play like Ragavan, it gets to play Ren and Six, it can play Urza Saga, it can play all these like busted cards that are all like very powerful. That even if you just play like Amulet Titan and you get Urza Saga, it's really good. If you play Ragavan in the Evoke deck or any of the other red decks, it's great. So on. Yawgmoth just couldn't get it done. I mean, Jim Davis doing very well with the deck at 8-2, and there was another player that went 7-3. But after that, it really kind of falls off, which is kind of unfortunate. Didn't really put anybody in contention of top 8 or even top 16. So to me, it's an underperformer. And the 4 color/5 color Omnath, pretty self-explanatory. Second most played deck in the field. Didn't put anybody in the top 8, and I believe there's only one copy in the top 16. Again, not very indicative of like the player itself, because obviously you could just do bad in constructed, and that also, or in limited, and that could affect your total overall. But if you kind of like look through here, I mean, we have like a 7-2 deck playing 4 color control, Gregory Orange, and from there, like you'll see some like these others. Like there's more 4 color like Rhinos decks and things like that than there are like 4 color Omnath decks and stuff like that. So definitely gets the underperformer badge from me in this event. While I don't think that means the deck is necessarily bad, I just think that if Tron is going to be this prevalent in the metagame, that 4 and 5 color Omnath decks are not going to be the way to go, even though the deck is objectively very powerful. Some more like kind of like my final thoughts. Let's kind of like wrap this up with this random rambling. So a few things to kind of take away from this. Tron is probably the best One Ring deck in the format right now. I think initially Tron was considered to be the best Ring deck, like when the set came out and when the One Ring was spoiled, simply for the fact that the One Ring is probably not going to be played in any decks that are not playing Karn, because it's just going to be another Karn target. And as we kind of seen in the differences between the Team Handshake Tron deck from from like Simon Nielsen, where they were playing all 4 rings in the main deck, where Christian Calcano was playing 3 rings in his main deck and one in his sideboard to go get with his Karn. We found out that Tron, very early on, that Tron is not the only deck that wants the One Ring, but still is probably the best deck for it, for the fact that it has a built-in way of just getting to get rid of the ring and just getting to access the sideboard, and also the planeswalker that allows it to access its sideboard to go get the ring or an answer to its own ring or opposing rings. Also just answers it itself by just stopping it from activating altogether, and of course allowing you to get the card advantage that you need, to where if you're playing the mirror and your opponent also gets a card in play, you're able to deal with their Karn in a timely manner, or just end up dealing with their ring before they deal with your Karn. And just kind of like this back and forth idea that whoever controls the ring probably controls the game, and I would think that that's probably about exactly right. So Tron, probably the best ring deck, and I'm willing to go as far as saying that it is the best ring deck at this current time, until there's some other build of maybe like 4 or 5 color Omnath, or even just a whole other deck entirely that can dethrone Tron. I think it's probably going to go out as the best ring deck to be playing in the format. With that said, going into next week, like through this week and the beginning of next week, there's going to be a ban announcement, I believe, for Modern, and in turn, I would imagine for the other Eternal formats, we get to kind of figure out like the fate of the One Ring. I mean, the One Ring was the most popular deck, or was the most popular card played in a field where like Crashing Footfalls like could play it, but I don't think necessarily plays it. And Rakdos mid range almost certainly doesn't play it. Maybe in like some small numbers, but definitely not to like 4 color slash 5 color Omnath and Tron, where there's 4 copies of it somewhere and it's 75. So, what happens to it? I honestly don't envy the decision in either case, simply for the fact that if you just leave it alone, it'll continue to be the most played card in the format. If you like say restrict it, being like the first card not in like vintage or whatever, to be restricted kind of like in this modern era of Magic, that I think it's like a flavor win, but at the same time like you'd kind of firmly push it into Tron's hands and kind of take it away from like the other players unless they have special ways of getting it. But in reality, I don't think players will necessarily build their decks around getting the One Ring, because then after that, like, what do you do? The One Ring has kind of like been this way to, fog your opponent for a turn, like essentially time walk, and then you're going to end up drawing 3 extra cards before you take any like meaningful amount of damage from like the One Ring. And uh, playing only one ring will kind of accentuate that like burden of playing and activating the ring, for the fact that now you can't take it up 3, 4, 5 counters and then play another ring and legend rule it. You have to have something like a Teferi Time Raveler to bounce it. You have to have like a Haywire Might to exile it, or something to that effect, to where you have to deal with your own ring or force your opponent to deal with it, whatever, and actually let that damage accrue over time, rather than just kind of getting bailed out by playing another ring to kind of reset it the hard way, and still getting to draw these cards without necessarily taking the damage from drawing those cards at the beginning of your next upkeep. So, uh, what do I want to see happen to the One Ring? Honestly, I'm not sure, and I think no matter what the decision is, I'll be kind of in the middle of the road where, I think I'm fine with banning, leaving it the way it is, or restricting it, and I think I can come up with a pretty good argument for doing all three of the same. So, obviously, only time will tell, but I would imagine there'll be some kind of shakeup to the ban list. Also, we could just unban something, would be kind of sweet, just to actually see, something kind of like come off the list. It's been a while since we've seen something come off the ban list. It'd be really cool to introduce something. It's new, since I believe the last card that we had unbanned was Stoneforge Mystic. That'd be cool. Uh, if the One Ring gets banned, does Bowmaster drop in usage? And I think Bowmasters was a very good way of countering the One Ring, where like your opponent, got to add counters to their ring. Did get to draw cards, but then Bowmaster kind of like dealt them the damage then. And if they couldn't reset the ring, then they were just dealt even more damage, which means that they would kind of want to draw more cards, which means that they'd have to find a way to deal with the Bowmaster before they could do so. That said, a lot of those decks kind of don't care about Bowmasters. They have pretty easy ways already built into their deck to get rid of Bowmasters. So, those ring decks, the decks that are probably playing Bowmaster, that kind of get a little bit more value out of, just getting to ping something and then make a 1/1, kind of like Yawgmoth, where it gets to use it as like some tempo, plus getting to use it as like convoke fodder for a Court of Calling. We'll probably continue to play it, but I would expect if the One Ring sees less play for some amount of reason, that Bowmaster probably takes a little dip in its usage as well. Whew. All right, that was a lot that we kind of went over in that video, and it was pretty long-winded, but I definitely wanted to get this out like ASAP. I mean, we have this whole pro tour. I'm gonna make sure I link this page in the description of this video as well, so you can kind of check out the different deck lists. I'm hoping throughout the week that I'm going to be able to get videos for the different top 8 decks. I have got some matches in with the Rakdos Evoke deck, which is pretty sweet, even getting to do the thing of double griefing, which is cool. I'm going to try to get Simon Nielsen's Tron list, or play some matches with Simon Nielsen and Team Handshake's version of Mono Green Tron, with Amulet Titan, powered by Dom Harvey, and then one of these Team Rhinos lists, which I think most of them besides some nuances, are kind of the same. So we're gonna take a look, and we're gonna try to get some matches out this week to kind of show off these decks. Of course, on the post Pro Tour, stuff until we get some kind of ban list and we figure out what's going to happen to the modern format. So that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like on it. And of course, consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so you see more videos like this and other modern and pioneer content as well. Follow the links in the description down below if you want to check out all the deck lists and their records from the Pro Tour. If you want to follow me on Twitch and if you want to join the Discord server. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed and hope to see you all in the next video.